And there were so many aspects of it that were just so completely overwhelming, and nothing was normal, and it was weird, and I couldn't think straight, and I couldn't remember things, and I couldn't get two sentences together. I couldn't read things and understand them, and it was very disconcerting to me. I had not ever been through anything like that, and I think in some sense, losing a husband or wife is kind of a one-time thing, and you don't have any frame of reference, and you don't know what you don't know, and it's just very discombobulating, if you will. And and I know that the other ladies who are further down that road than I am, bless their hearts, they've answered strange questions that I've asked, and part of that is, will it ever get any better? I feel like I'm losing my mind. I've just never, I've never been able to not process things before, and so every one of them says, yes, it will get better. Like, okay, it's not dementia yet. It's not. It was really, that part was just so disorienting in a very real way. And so I've kind of tried to distill down some of those things that I ran into that I thought may, hopefully this is useful. And if there are things that you haven't done that you could do before you lose your husband, it'll make it at least a little bit easier. And also my hope would be that I talked to the Care and Share team. If there are volunteer places where each of us, as we know our skills and so forth, if there's some of those small helps that we could kind of come alongside in those early days. And I have to say that I'm not sure I could have answered the question at that point. What do you need? What can I do? I don't know. I just don't know. But looking back, there were some things that I probably either help or just a little bit of company every now and again. And silly things like, there are things in the pantry that that I didn't, and so I knew I would never use them, but just to kind of stand there and stare at the shelves going, well, what do I put in the box, or what do I put in the trash, or just silly stuff. I think another big one for me was just to have someone look at my mail when it came in, because it was hard to determine what was important and what was time sensitive and what could wait and what was trash, and everything was just so overwhelming on some level. I've asked a couple of husbands to help me put together a tool chest in the garage, and perhaps help me find some young people who are needing tools that I can bless with. And because I would walk out to the garage and I would just stare, and then I would turn around and walk back in the house because I just couldn't do it. And I don't know what most things are. I mean, that frame of reference is just, Kent had his stuff to do and I had my stuff to do. I do this stuff.
Yeah.
I don't do that stuff out there. Garage stuff. Anyway, I wanted to start a little bit with on advocacy. I know that if you have someone who is chronically ill or terminally ill, you're kind of in the trenches for whatever period of time that ends up being. And I learned a couple of things that I thought might be helpful. One that I didn't know when I went to my primary care for my physical that first year, and I hadn't slept much in a week, and so I was in a puddle. I mean, I was just a mess and just didn't know what end was up in those early stages. And there was so much to learn and so much to manage and this and that. And she kind of looked at me and she said, Barbara, first you need a good night's sleep. All right then. So it was the first time I've ever taken sleeping pills, but it really helped to be able to get a decent night's sleep. Sounds simple, but it never occurred to me, to be honest. And the other thing that she did for me is that even in this little podunk clinic in Priest River, Idaho, they have someone called a caseworker, and they tend to be nurses, but with some social work background, and they will come alongside you and help you manage the medications as you kind of go down that road, to keep track of things and to make sure that that information as they change gets to the other specialists that might be in the mix. And and she provided a sounding board for me. She would call me at least once a month. Sometimes I'd be on the phone for an hour. I could pour out my heart, I could share my frustrations, I could get advice. She was just a lifesaver. When we were in San Diego in those last days, I can't recommend you go to this on vacation, I really can't. So, but bless her heart, I called her because at one point when he had been admitted to the hospital for a time for those few days, they locked down the hospital for COVID again. Well, our entire little family unit had just had COVID. All of us were done and this and that. And so I explained it to her. I said, I'm not a threat to Kent. Kent's not a threat to any of us. I want to see my husband. And she facilitated that for me. It was something that I never could have done on my own. And so, so if you have any, some access to someone with those kinds of skills on the inside of the system, I just found it invaluable help through that 14 months. Pharmacies. Learned a lot about pharmacies I didn't want to know. And, but I had some trouble with Safeway. There were some corporate things that were coming into their system that caused them to act in a particular way. And part of that was that if you're on a regular medication long term, whether it's for blood pressure or diabetes or any of those kinds of things, that they will automatically refill those prescriptions. So as all of these cardiac meds were being tried, and because it was all trial and error, which was also amazing to me, and so they would be changing. Doses would change, the mix would change, and this and that, all for several months. And all of a sudden, Kent would be coming home with his meds, and there'd be something extra in the bag. It's like, well, that wasn't, and so finally I had to go down and talk to the pharmacist, and she said that some of the insurance companies feel like they're at higher risk because people who are on chronic meds and aren't taking them, that they have a bigger risk of having a health crisis and that sort of thing. So if the pharmacies don't take the lead with this automatic refill kind of thing, then the insurance companies are charging them back for the things that aren't being used. And I thought, well, I can't live with that right now. I just can't. And so I did change over to White Cross Pharmacy. There's one in the Super One, and they had another program when I went in to kind of talk through what these things were and how they were changing and so forth. And she said, well, we have this nice pill pack program, doesn't cost you any extra, but when you have all of these mixes and you're taking them 3 or 4 times a day, they will pre-pack those things in little things with labels on them in big print that tell you when to take them and what's in the little pill pack. I thought it was just a lovely service to avail yourself up, again, in some of those chronic type long-term situations. And then the other thing is hospice care when the time comes. And I know that there are pros and cons of that, and there was a lot that I didn't understand about it. I think sometimes people feel like it's giving up to get hospice care. But they provide, in my mind, that was my 3rd time with hospice. But part of the things that I found, one, again, the nurses who do hospice care are a huge resource. Absolutely any question you have, they will answer for you. They don't sugarcoat it, but it's good, solid, real information. And so that you can kind of learn and this and that. And the other thing is that they really cautioned me. They said, if at all possible, again, with longer term illness kinds of things that are headed down that road, part of what they do is provide what they call it a comfort care kit. It's a kit with drugs in it for pain relief and anxiety and some of those kinds of things to relieve some of the suffering. And they said, you really want to have that sooner than later. They said, it's okay if you go put it in the closet. It's just, but when you need it, you want it there. In Kent's particular case, we didn't have the luxury of that. And part of what I learned there was that you need a doctor's referral to get a hospice evaluation or hospice care. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, why in the dickens why do we have to do that? Can't I just call hospice? Well, no, you can't. And so that goes back to kind of to a primary care. Of course, again, we were 1,400 miles away from anybody we knew. And They took a really long time and they would look at me like I had 3 heads when I asked for a hospice consultation. And I thought, well, it's not the first death I had attended, and that's kind of the way it was looking. And he had gotten to a place, he was losing his mental faculties, he was refusing food and water and medication. So I just felt I at least wanted them to evaluate him, and I couldn't get that done without a doctor's prescription. And they did not write that as a part of his discharge orders when he came home from the hospital. They refused to write them when we called and asked. His attending pulmonologist refused to write an order for us. The home health care people finally found they had some local physicians in San Diego County, and so they came out to the house to evaluate him. And even then, those 2 practitioners looked at me and said, well, Mrs. Kraber, why is it you want a hospice consult? Well, because I've been up all night yet and I know what I'm looking at, even though I don't have a medical background, I don't have a legal background, but there's, life has exposures to different kinds of things. You learn a little bit every now and again, I guess. But, so it was really, really hard. And then when he started getting into stress the night before, so we lost a day when we got that appointment, another day till they scheduled hospice. And by the night before, he was in some real trouble, in some real distress, and I couldn't get help for him. I was just beside myself. I called hospice. I said, what do we do? My sister had come down to be with me, and she said, it was 3 o'clock in the morning. I said, can you come? And because in the other situations when we had hospice, they came. I mean, you could call them 24/7. And she said, well, I'm really sorry. She said, they had his name and address and the situation and all that stuff. They had the file made, but because they had not laid eyes on him yet, we were not yet official. So, just, so I just wanted to share that from a perspective that you don't always know what you don't know. And there are real potential consequences to that you can't make better. And when you're sitting there, Lord, I don't know how to help. He was having trouble breathing. They didn't even send him home with oxygen. I mean, I had nothing. And so, and I didn't have a hospital bed. We were in the guest room at my stepson's home. And so my sister and I are trying to get pillows behind. You just can't recommend it. So anyway, and then by the time they did get there, there was just weight after weight. The drugs and the comfort kits are so highly regulated because there had been so much abuse by, drug-addled nurses and whatever else. And so they had to come from a pharmacy that was an 1.5-hour drive away. So at least talk to your primary care about it. Call hospice, learn about it, see what they can and cannot do, what they do and do not do, and some of those kinds of things if there's ever, because again, they'll kind of walk you through that and educate you and so forth. So, so that's kind of my advocacy spiel, because I think we all want to do the right thing by the one that we're helping care for. And then after the fact, I found there were a number of things that I thought might be useful in terms of doing beforehand that will make the after part a little bit easier. And some of those things is, to start learning just the real basics about probate. And probate is where the court system in either Idaho or Washington make the decisions about how the estate gets divided. If you don't have a written will, if there are other things that make it more complicated, a trust will avoid probate, but it's expensive to get. You've got to have maintenance every year because the IRS changes the rules, and that has to be in compliance, and yada yada. But at the very least, a will, I've heard in Idaho, one of those triggers, even with a will, is if you have multiple beneficiaries. Because then that's going to involve, like I said, the court system and attorneys and fees and on and on and on. So, so they're at least start taking a look at that. And then there are things, some of the other triggers in Idaho I found is that if if you do have wills and trusts, make sure they're signed. I heard just in the last several weeks that there was an older couple and the one who passed never got around to signing it.
Oh boy.
Not fun stuff. It just makes the whole thing worse. Part of it are titles on things. Make sure that if your home is owned by the two of you, that you own it in joint tenancy. There'll be an and between your names, and there'll be something that talks about tenancy. The word joint is one of those magical ones. With vehicles and toys, boats, ATVs, all that kind of thing, make sure the registrations have both of your names on them, but there's an or in there, not an and, so that you can sign the title if you go to sell it. If it says and, it requires both signatures, you won't be able to do it. That triggers probate. Life gets more complicated. Yes?
In Idaho, I know most of you from Newport, you can get a survivor's agreement.
Okay.
And everything automatically goes to you.
Yeah.
Or the remaining spouse.
Okay.
Y'all need to have something like that.
You've got to have something. It's just, and they're really no fun. You know, you get, you can do them online, and there are probably some that are fine for a simpler kind of a situation. But you need to get one that's good in Idaho or Washington, depending on where you're living. And it'll go through and it'll ask you a lot of questions. And it's really uncomfortable information, you know, kind of your last wishes and DNRs and power of attorneys and, you know, medical power of attorneys and all those kinds of things. It will ask you questions about if there are children, if it's a blended family. There are lots of moving parts in all of those kinds of things. But to not have one will really complicate your life at the end of the day. Same thing with bank accounts. I knew we had a joint account. Never occurred to me to ask any other questions. We'd had it for several years. And so when I called the bank, that was probably the best news I got. She said, oh, you're fine. You have joint tenancy with survivorship. Okay. She said, you can continue using your checks with both names on it. It'll be completely transparent. So then I made an appointment with her, went in and took care of, changing the name on it, doing the part with the mortgage. She got that over there, ordering new checks and some of those kinds of things to kind of finish up with. Any of your other financial portfolios, 401ks, Roth IRAs, stocks and bonds and mutual funds and all those kinds of things, they will have things that you can fill out if you haven't already done them that deal with that survivorship and the beneficiaries in a much more formal way. So, for example, Kent has 2 adult children. I don't have any. So our beneficiaries are different. But it also dealt with multiple levels of that. Should one of those beneficiaries be deceased at the time of your passing, then it deals with several levels all the way down. So, but you really have to think through some of those kinds of things. Would it go to a grandchild of a deceased child? Would it go, if both of us died at the same time, then what happens? And it's all done in percentages and gets very formal too. And then personal belongings. You can designate certain things in your will if you want to. My mother was a February baby, and so she had some amethyst jewelry, and one of her great-granddaughters was born in February, and so she designated those things in her will to her great-granddaughter. So, or the other thing is to gift things now, potentially. There's nothing that would stop you from doing that. And so, like I said, the more you don't have to think about afterwards, I would really highly recommend. Credit cards can be tricky. There was a day once upon a time, hopefully there are some of them that are different now, but the account holder is not the same as the authorized user. And if the account holder dies, the authorized user no longer has a credit card. So you need to know those things. Which one do you each have your own? If you don't, see how those are done. Call whatever, wherever they came from. and make sure that you know what kind of an account that is, so that if it's only his, and you want to make sure that you've got access to capital when the time comes, because you'll have expenses and things, then go get your own. Even if it has a small limit or something like that, at least have access to that sort of thing. Same thing with cash. Some people do only things with cash. Then there are going to be things at the end of the day that you're going to need a fair amount of cash for, whether those are funeral expenses, whether it's enough to buy plane tickets for a family to come to services, whether any of the other kinds of things that could be. Try to put a list together and try to get numbers to it so that you can sort of figure out how much cash you might want to have on here. Utilities, I found that they're all different. Vista was really nice. They just asked for the date of death, and I did it all over the phone, and they changed the name on the account. With a propane company, I had to fill out all new paperwork. Ken had just signed up for it himself, and I couldn't use it until I did, even though the online payment thing was all alike and all that jazz. I mean, anyway, you just don't know what you're going to run into in some sense. And then come pensions and Social Security, and what is your income going to look like at the end of the day? Most income amounts will go down from whatever that is. Do you know if there's a pension involved? Do you know what the terms of the pension are? In my mother's case, my dad's union pension only had survivorship benefits for the first 10 years of retirement. So if he had passed in year 1, she would have had 9 more years. If he passed any time after 10 years, which he did, bless his heart, she would get 0. That would go to 0. My son, who does, is union labor, different union than my dad, he can't answer the question, and neither can his wife. It's like, well, and they have a minor child. You kind of need to know this stuff. You need to be able to understand it. And so Social Security does all of that stuff behind the scenes. They are required by federal law. Whatever entity handles the body is required by federal law to report that death with that Social Security number to the federal government. So Social Security starts doing all of those things in the background. And so all of a sudden, then just the number that goes into your checking account goes down. Whether you understand it or not. And then the letter comes later. So. Wow. And I tried to get an appointment. I was on a waiting list. I got an appointment 2 months down the road. Telephone appointment in Idaho. And then on the Friday before my Monday appointment, they called and canceled it. It's just.
It's hard to get the appointment.
Yeah. So, and then if there are life insurance policies or death benefits with a pension or other little one-time things, you need to find that paperwork and know who to tell and how that works and what you're going to need and how much the amount is. And for Ken's pension, they couldn't even answer it until I had filled out a 20-page application. That was after I had done the notification online, which seemed pretty thorough to me, but oh, trust me, the thing they sent was... but they made sure that the money was flowing we had signed up for a 50% survivorship part to his pension, so I kind of knew. But then when you go to kind of put together a new pension, or a new budget, then there are going to be some offsets. So with the pension, that covered our supplemental medical insurance. Well, that premium doesn't come out of there anymore, so it makes that 50% worth a little more because you don't have. So it's kind of this, plus here, minus here, all of those kinds of things. You won't be paying insurance premiums anymore. You won't have the same pharmacy bills to pay. Groceries go down. If you have extra vehicles to sell, the vehicle insurance will go down. And then I looked at a couple of, and I don't know whether it was because it was so early in the game, I was trying to find like a budgeting app that I could put on my phone. I couldn't make heads or tails of any of them. I tried to go different ways. So some of the Christian ones and this and that. And I thought, okay, why are you renaming all? I just want to know how much money I'm going to have for any given month. And so I finally went to an Excel spreadsheet, and they have sample budgets, and I found that it was a lot easier to add a line and put things in. You know, I have dog grooming and, you know, different kinds of, just to kind of get a handle on what that's going to look like at the end of the day. So, and that brings me to the really big questions. If you can't answer them now, you need to be able to answer them at some point. Do you have enough money to live in your house, to stay in your house? Is the house manageable to take care of? You know, repairs and grounds and this and that. And if you can't answer those questions, it's a whole lot easier to answer them now than when you don't know and can't think. So, and I think, you know, even with the music we had this morning, the thing that kept playing in my head was Psalms 139. In some very real sense, to me, the Lord numbers our days. He knows when He's going to call each of us home, and we don't get to pick that. And as hard as we work and as hard as we try, I just don't see that changing very much. You know, He picks that day. And so on some level in my mind, because of that, it gave me this small sense of normalcy, because the day Ken and I made that commitment, we knew that death would part us. It's just part of the territory. And but somehow, as much as you prepare and you think, well, how this and how that, and we tried very hard to put features into this home that would allow us to age in place. That was plan A. I know that I can put in a stair lift in my stairwell because I had a man come out and measure the landing, and it was a ½ inch short in one dimension, and so Kent went and ripped off the top of that stair and made it ½ inch short. That was my hint. And then afterwards, in terms of, you know, there are a lot of notifications to make, and I know the very first day for me, I just handed my phone to my sister, and I said, call this, that, the other person. I couldn't talk on the phone, and it would have been woefully time-consuming to do that personally.
Yeah.
And I was exhausted. And I just, and so bless her heart, here's how to get into my phone. Just because we had visited with a lot of people the 2 or 3 weeks prior to that. I mean, it was just so fast and shocking all the way around. And I think if you have a third party do that, either a trusted friend or someone to come alongside for doing some of that sort of thing, people that they call won't be as obliged to try to keep them on the phone for a long time. You can just kind of get through some of those early parts of things. Then you'll be ordering death certificates from, again, whoever handles the body. I did find that you don't need nearly as many original death certificates or certified death certificates that you used to, because most of the folks I dealt with, they can look up that number that's on the certificate online, so they can verify that either if you took a picture with your phone or made a copy and emailed it. Most places were not requiring the certified ones these days. Although the one thing that his pension asked me to send with that 20-page application thing that I made so many errors on was our marriage certificate. He had been married before. Part of his pension had been split, and so even though I had recorded those things, the dates that it asked for on the computer at the early time, I still hadn't. When I was on the phone asking another question, they said, "Oh, well, you know, add your marriage certificate too." I said, "Oh, I gotta go find that."
Oh.
You know, and I have my own set of messy stacks of stuff. I don't have the best filing system.
That's hard to believe.
I kind of know what room things are in, and that's about as good as it gets. But you're just going to need to be able to put your hands on all of these things as they apply. So then, and then in terms of notifications, my goodness, we had all kinds of doctor's appointments and medical procedures at different facilities and this and that and the other kind already on the books that I had been canceling while we couldn't come home, and then after the fact, like, and then I would still get questions, follow-up phone calls. Well, he had a skin cancer. Well, I had canceled that when I was in San Diego, didn't really think about it past that. And then they're calling me going, well, are you ready? He really needs to have that taken care of. And I'm thinking,
It's taken care of.
it just kind of, hits you in the gut every time the phone rings or every time something comes in the mail and I found that, and kind of at the end of COVID and so forth, there had been so many staff changes and so many staff losses, and you ended up talking to new people, and they made errors, and so there's all this follow-up to go through. It's and fix things, and it's like, but I don't want to think about it. I can't think about it. So it's real tricky, and so some of the kinds of things that I talked to kind of Karen share about. If you have and maybe a son or a daughter can do those things. Maybe they can't. Maybe it's too emotional for them too. But for us to be able to network to the degree that you have somebody that you can trust and that can come alongside and walk through some of those kinds of things to help you get through it all. And then the day came when I went to the doctor just for my annual checkup, and you fill out your, the new information at the beginning of the year, and you get to the line that says emergency contact.
Oh.
I didn't have an answer. It's like, oh, well, I don't know. I mean, my sister lives 1,400 miles away. Does that make any sense? I don't know. I don't know. So right now it's blank. And so then and then I've had a couple of situations in the last few months where I tried to find a friend on the phone that was 1,000 miles away. One of them couldn't get. There was a strange recording on her phone. Could not, and I didn't know any of her other local contacts. So it took me probably 3.5 weeks to find somebody who also knew her that could tell me, is she still alive? Is she in the hospital? What has happened?
Wow.
Because I can't get her. And then I thought, gee, up until June, none of my closer friends in this room had my sister's phone number. No one could have told if something happened to me. And so there's this whole other world. And if I fell at home, I have an alarm system on the home. Does anybody have your alarm code? Does anybody have a key to your front door? And trust me, when Ken built this place, you'd have to have a battering ram to get in here. It's just this whole list of odd things that are all new that you have to consider and make provision for and all that sort of thing. And in this electronic world, it's just nuts.
Yes, it is.
Where did Stephanie's sitting over there in the corner. The other thing that's attached here is a table of contents to, it's called a Peace of Mind Planner. And if you just look at that list of all the things that to capture, and even when Jared came over this morning with the equipment, he said, I do all the finances, Lisa doesn't have a clue, she couldn't get into my computer. It's like, this is serious stuff.
Yeah.
It's all locked behind these things. And, I had automated pretty much everything, bill paying and, this and that. And I use my thumbprint on my phone. I need to have a second thumbprint in there for a trusted friend to be able to unlock everything. So it's, like I said, it's just becomes, life is more complicated with computers. There used to be an address book sitting on a little end table somewhere that had everybody's phone number in it. There was one per family, and I think it's just a different world. It's just different. Yes, ma'am.
One thing you haven't mentioned, and with the fires around us, and a moment's notice you're gone.
Yes.
Get a firebox.
A firebox.
Put your papers in.
Yeah.
And if you have all your
Yeah.
deeds, ballots, marriage,
All that stuff,
you got all that,
Yeah.
it's easy to grab and take.
I ordered mine.
Yeah.
That board, yes.
It's hard to get.
Yes. And there's even in here, it's like, well, what happens to my dog? I would hate for her to be put down if she's still healthy, but I haven't asked anybody if they take my dog. I get it first.
That might not be a problem.
$50, I'll take $50. 60, 70.
So this, yes, ma'am.
One of the things I found, first of all, going back to when I was much younger, I knew way back when that it's really important to have your own credit. And what really surprises me is talking to people I know now.
Mhm.
The women are like, I have no clue about paying bills, I have no credit card of my own. I'm thinking, that is,
It
they
can
go,
be
well, I
catastrophic.
don't take care of that. If you lose that credit card from your husband and you don't have one,
Access to.
you don't have any credit.
Yeah.
Get it now. I
Yeah.
knew that a long time ago after Jeff died.
Yes, yes. There are hard lessons that you don't have to learn the hard way
Yeah.
with, a little, at least some sense of some of those kinds of things. Stephanie turned me on to the table of contents is from this Peace of Mind planner. It has all of those, that's where this came from. And it's a place to keep all of that information. And that would be nice to put in the fire safe box when you're done with it. It has all of the, and it also has some of your wishes and that sort of thing. And I don't know how often husbands and wives talk about such things.
Never.
If you are called to make a hard decision when the time comes, do you know what his wishes are? Do you know, they're just tough conversations that, does he know what you would want in the same situation? Do your kids know? And so I just wanted to give you a little sense. And then there's going to be a place for professional paid-for services. There are certain things that us as volunteers and friends can do, and other things that you're going to need someone to, either financial planners, attorneys, doctors, all of those kinds of things. The other thing I learned from hospice that helped me not think I was completely crazy. They will come alongside you and any other family member. You just give them a name and address. They then have access to either online grief services, in-person grief sessions. I got a letter once a month for a while, and it would explain a different aspect of grief. One of those that came that was particularly good for me was I couldn't understand. I was feeling guilty about, even though I couldn't think straight, I wasn't just in a puddle all the time. And I thought, well, what's wrong with me? Did I not love him enough? Why am I not crying? And the letter they sent me explained the concept that there are two basic styles of grieving, and one is emotional and one is analytical. And it's really okay, either one. Perhaps you try to get, kind of meet in the middle at some point. But it was nice to hear that something was normal, that I couldn't identify. It didn't make any sense to me. Yes.
Question?
Yes, ma'am.
Where do we get that piece?
Oh, well, Amazon carries it, probably a lot of places do. I happen to have a Prime account, so I didn't pay for shipping, but it was like $13 and change out the door. So it's very inexpensive. It's got all of these categories in it. And just places to be able to record those things that would be helpful to whoever's left behind.
Make sure someone has the code to your firebox.
Yes. I probably won't, other than my passport, won't be anything in that particular one of any, I probably won't lock it even.
There you go, that takes care of that.
Yeah. But I need to tell a couple people where it is and what's in it and, all those things. It was just amazing to me. I talked to my sister a couple of weeks ago. She's been, newly married 3 or 4 years. And I was telling her these things to try to find somebody if you don't have some connecting point elsewhere. And she goes, oh. She said, we don't even have each other's passwords to our phone.
Oh, wow.
And her husband didn't have my phone number in his phone if something had happened to my sister. It's like, I just find it all shocking. But, so hopefully this has been useful in some sense to just kind of start thinking about some of the things before you are thrust into a place of having to unwind a life and not even having a clue where to start, or not being able to get at it. So anyway, those were kind of my thoughts, and
I'd like to say just one more quick thing.
you bet.
Mine always goes, I ask it about stuff, and he goes, well, it's all on my computer, it's all on my computer.
That-
And I'm saying, I know I can get into your computer, and I know I can probably find it, but what happens if your computer dies?
Yes.
So I keep saying, I want.
Somewhere you need something
I
on
want
paper.
paper, but
Yeah.
I'm saying, all this stuff on it, because,
Yeah.
Hard copies.
yes.
Yeah.
We called it a cheat sheet.
Yes.
And
Yes.
years before my husband passed away, we were going on a trip together. And so we put literally in Word document, all of the account numbers, phone numbers to call, credit card.